Welcome back to Shed Built. In this episode, we're actually in the shed, we're installing the clutch and removing the dash. Alright, so first things first, we'll remove the starter and undo the bell housing bolts, and then we're going to put it on a little dolly, wheel it outside and give it a clean. Look at the state of this. What a grimy boy. Alright, so I just nipped down to the local Toyota to grab a new selector bush and the seat. So selector bush goes in the end here, and the seat wraps around this ball joint looking thing. Tighten up the shifting a lot. So I'll get those installed, add a bit of lubricant in there, and we'll install this thrust bearing. Then we can get onto the clutch. That is tight. Alright, so this is the clutch we're going with. It's a 4Terrain Ultimate heavy duty clutch. Look at this lovely little box it came with here. Looks pretty fancy. But inside we got our pressure plate, alignment tool, pilot bearing. We've got our throw-up bearing installed, which you would have already seen. We've got the clutch plate here. So we're going to install the pilot bearing first. Got it here. We're going to use a bit of bread and a bit of grease. I want to go a bit of grease first to see how stuck it is. Alright, so if you've never done this before, if you've never seen this method of removing a pilot bearing before, I'll give you a quick rundown of what's about to happen. Basically, you just want to find a bolt that fits snug inside the pilot bearing and a bit of grease. And what you're going to do is just take the grease, pack it inside of the pilot bearing, fill that cavity in the back there, and then get your bolt and plunge it in between, and the pressure from the grease behind it will slowly start to push the bearing out, well, in theory anyway. So we'll see how we go, but obviously as you're packing the grease in and pushing it out, you're gonna have to keep adding more and more, so it's a bit of a dirty process, but it gets the job done and you don't need to get a bearing puller. So let's start packing her up. new bearing. Got my high-tech press. It's not a socket. Smash it in. Alright, so I just stole the pressure plate off the old 2H, and this thing is filthy. Just caked on there with grime. I was trying to find the one that I took off the E12HT, but it's gone. It's in this abyss, in this jungle here somewhere. I just can't find it. But I'm gonna throw that in the parts washer, and this is the flywheel that came off the 12HT. You can still see the machining marks, and it's in a hell of a lot better condition than the one I just pulled off the 2H. You can see all those burn marks. So I'll be running this with this, put them in that, get them on that. So the clutch is installed, all the bolts are torqued. I messed around with the pressure plate for a bit because I felt like these dowel pins there were a bit too big, but after a bit of persuasion, it's all good, it's all in there, everything's located. The disc looks nice and centered using an alignment tool. After doing a bit more research, I realized that this is actually a Mantic built clutch. So the 4Terrain is built by Mantic, which explains the fancy packaging and why everyone raves about them online. So I'm pretty excited to try it out. But for now, we'll get the gearbox mated to the engine, and then we can look at putting it in the Troopy. So after a lot of trial and error, finally got the box mated to the 12HT. It was difficult trying to get the angles right, but I ended up just mounting or placing the engine on a block on the ground to stop that from moving back and forward. And then the box, I managed to just push it straight on in once it was at the right angle. But now I'm going to install a new slave cylinder, clean up the starter, mount that, and that'll be about it. Might tidy up a bit of the wiring harness as well. I'm just replacing this starter signal wire. You can see the wire's all corroded and it's just gone rock solid. So I've got a bit of high amp wiring here. Just stolen the terminal off the original. You can see the sheathing was all stuffed. I'll re-terminal it. Alright, so I'm starting work on the main loom now for the gearbox. You see how dirty all these connectors and the harness is. So I've just plugged everything in, ensuring I know where everything goes. So now I'm going to unloom it all, reloom it, clean up all the connectors, and it should be nice and solid. Alright, so I cleaned up all the pins on the main connector and cleaned the connector itself. All the waterproof connectors, they're pretty good. All the connections are nice and clean. I've just sprayed some contact cleaner inside them and cleaned up the connectors themselves. Just got all the grime and that off them. So now I'm going to go through and loom the whole harness with a bit of cloth tape, heat shrink this connector, and should be good as new. Alright, so I realise I haven't actually discussed what we are doing with this gearbox. It's the H55F stock Toyota gearbox for the HJ75. There's nothing wrong with it, it's fine, it's obviously filthy. But I have got onto a mob here in Perth, in Wangara, that are going to be rebuilding it and doing a 5th gear mod. So we're going to run it for now, and for the meantime I want to do a couple of trips in it. But once we get back, they are going to be removing it and doing a complete rehaul. So with that said, that's about it for this episode. We got a heap done, got the clutch installed, gearbox installed, dash removed. Basically everything to do with the engine now is ready to go in the Troopy. So stick around for next week when we get stuck into the firewall, and we may even start reassembling the dash. But until then, subscribe if you haven't already, drop a like, you know the deal. I'll see you next time.